Good morning to you all and welcome to Asake Online. My name is Zenzele Ndebele and this is the Breakfast Club. Today in the program, we'll be talking to Zephaniah Nkomo. He is the director of Mafela Trust and former ZPRA intelligence officer under the NSO, National Security and Order.
National Security and Order was an organization set up to overlook the operations and also the principle, the adherence of Zapo and its military wing, ZPRA.
So you were the intelligence officer from, the time of the war up to 1980?
No, I joined the war. I found others already in the war.
Yeah.
I went into war in 1976, newly very late, but I happened to be trained in military and also had to go into specialized training in the intelligence and police work. And I was deployed in various camps in the rear and more importantly on the presidential, which is the higher personnel of the party. That's where I was in charge of their security.
So basically we were in charge of the security of the VIPs?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that could have been, that should have been very interesting because you were involved in the integrities, planning their programs and all those kind of things. And
not really on security matters. You don't go into their programs, but you go into looking into their programs. Their programs is more of an internal thing to themselves, but in security you look at for what reasons are these done and the impact of such programs that are really linked up with the high-profiled personnel.
Yeah. So we get independence in 1980 and everyone comes back. Where do you go?
I left Zambia coming into the new Zimbabwe to be. In 1980, I passed through Harare and landed in Bulawayo. As I earlier on said, I was in charge of the high-profile personnel of Zapo. I led a contingent of young officers who were to provide security at Joshua Nkomo's home. And this is what I did with my unit.
So how long were you providing that security?
We did provide that security for quite a long time. Nearly, I think it's about 3 months, while a lot of things were happening in the country. And later I was moved out from the Joshua Nkomo security home to head the security at the party headquarters at Hassamal's building, where I was in charge of security. Security in this aspect is relating to the operations of the party at the headquarters, the behavioral patterns that were expected to be adhered to from the people coming from exile that were visiting the party. I became a link to these people, those that were coming from exile and those that were at home here, so that it would be easy to communicate and understand each other.
So you were never integrated in the National Army? Or in the...
Yes, I was never integrated. I was never integrated in the National Army. But I had lined up for integration like any other returning freedom fighter who was coming back to serve his country. We were to be integrated in the police force, which is another department of the intelligence. We stayed at Ashton Farm near the airport for a period of more than 3 months, awaiting integration. And Robert Mugabe refused integrating us. Some of us, some were integrated, some were turned away. I included, turned away.
What do you think was the reason for you being turned away?
Well, the clearer reason that came up to us was that the majority of our personnel, or nearly all of them, had been trained by the Soviet Union. And I think they were seeing Russians in black faces. So we couldn't be accepted in the integration.
So that moment when you go there, you are excited about the new Zimbabwe and you're told that you cannot be integrated. How did you feel? What was what was going through your mind as you walk home knowing that you're not going to serve Zimbabwe again?
In fact, when we understood that we had found Zimbabwe now to be run by ZANU, PF, and never in the history before had it happened that we worked together. And it was no surprise at all, though we were not happy about the whole arrangement of leaving us out. But we knew difficulties were there of how we're going to work together. We have had several unity accords trying to unite these two people, these two nations. It has never happened before.
So you mentioned that we have had several unit accords, an indication that the 1987 unit accord was not the first accord.
Yes, certainly yes, it was not. We had the ZPRA before. In fact, the first account of trying to put up a unity of this nation was in 17 March 1896, during the days of Lopengula, when Mkwati Ncube and Mashingaidze. Mkwati Ncube was one of the commanders of Lopengula. They engaged white people in battle at Mondoro, where both the Shona people, led by Mashingaidze, and the contingent of Matabele people, led by Mkwati Ncube, fought the whites. And that was an attempt to unite these people.
So now, I mean, after all these efforts, there are still issues definitely between Shona Ndebele, Zapo, and ZPRA. I mean, which is a discussion probably that we are going to pick it later on. But now I want to understand like the work that you do. You know, you have started Mafela Trust. I mean, or you are part of, I mean, as the director of Mafela Trust. What is the main aim of Mafela Trust?
The main aim of Mafela Trust, as it was set in 1989, was to document the history of the liberation struggle and carry out research. The two aspects of that discourse would be to compile registers of the war dead and assist families of those who died during the war to receive official documents like birth certificates and IDs and citizenship certification. These are a demand from the living sons and daughters of freedom fighters born outside Zimbabwe. And these are also freedom fighters who died in the country during the operations, and some who died in countries that are foreign and left families. And it is necessary that they receive our confirmation of what happened or to give effect of those loved ones who did not return from war.
Yeah, my follow-up questions on that one basically is to start with, at your peak, how strong was ZPRA in terms of numbers? How many men and women did we have?
We had a lot of men, but closer to figures, more than 10,000 men were a contingent of ZPRA. More than, I'm saying more than, it's 10,000 plus.
These were the men were fighting?
Yeah, both rear and front.
And how many people do you think died from the ZPRA side during that time?
Close to 4,000 people died during the war. We have records of these people who died during the war, being freedom fighters in the battlefields inside Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, those that died in Zambia, Angola, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Zambia, and Mozambique.
Then you also mentioned, the issue of birth certificates, and we understand that you are giving, or helping some of the families with birth certificates, especially, including those who died during the intumbani battles. Why intumbani?
Intumbani was still, the battles of Intumbani that happened between 1980 November to 81 were still became a fresh link to the period of ceasefire when people were going into assembly points. And the soldiers of Zenzele and ZPRA that were in the Ntumbani camps were all soldiers coming from assembly points on a transit to be reintegrated. So we cover that period up to 1981, identifying and certifying those men who perished at Ntumbani.
From in total, how many people could have died during the Ntumbani battles?
There are around 400 that we have picked as names, but there are more than 400 because there were those who died there, both Zenzele and ZPRA. There were about 7 coaches of rail that were loaded up with dead bodies, and we don't know what happened.
So these people were never buried?
We don't know what happened. But what we know of is that about 7 coaches were loaded up with bodies and this disappeared. We don't know what happened.
So, what you're simply saying is that you don't know what happened to the bodies?
Yes, I don't know what happened.
And from the ZPRA side, how many did you lose?
We lost quite as I said, in our records of what we managed to capture is about 400. And the numbers are still growing up because we still receive people coming to ask for death confirmation of their children who died at Ntumbani, even up to today, 2018.
So if you are registering people, helping people who died in Ntumbani, why are you not helping those who died during Kukuraundi?
Our mandate specifically looks into the Liberation War episodes. But in the understanding of a dead person and their grave sites, the respect that we give to the dead is not different from anybody killed during Kukuraundi and during the Liberation War. We give them, or we look forward to see a decent burial and a decent handling of such cases.
So you, I mean, fast forward later, then later, I mean, a few years down the line, you are arrested. Why were you arrested?
I was linked up to the shooting of the Prime Minister's residence
That is it.
in Salisbury.
Okay.
I was not even involved in that.
Were you
But
in
the
Harare
link
then?
is because I'm a ZPRA. And I happen to be known that I belonged to the NSO department.
So
And I became a suspect.
was NSO responsible for shooting at the Prime
No,
Minister's residence?
no, not at all.
So who were other people that you were arrested with?
There are quite many. Some are late. The majority of them are now late. The majority of them are now late.
And how long did you stay in prison?
3.5 years.
Were you charged, convicted, or what?
No. There were only allegations. No charges. Nothing substantial that could create a prima facie case to take us to court. And eventually we were released.
So you stayed for 3 years without going to court?
Yeah. It's more than 3 years, because remember when I was picked up at the time of my arrest, I was thrown to stops camps in Bulawayo, where I was heavily tortured. From torture, spending almost about, I think, 2 months here, spent almost about another 2 months in Kami prison before I was transferred to Grubi Maximum Prison to spend those 3. So it's almost 4 years.
So you've ever thought of suing the government because of that?
No. We've been angry about that situation ever since, and trying to find how best we could be understood by these people. And it has been very difficult, as is revealed by these attempts to bring about coexistence that is likely to be very impossible if nothing is done to change our attitudes, both the Shona people and the Matabele people.
Then we get to a time when the arms Zapo arms are found in Zapo properties. I mean, at that time you are in jail or you're out?
No, I'm already in prison. In fact, this started before I was in prison, because I think there has been some plan, from the look of things, that our arrest becomes complicated to the finding of the arms caches that are said to have been hidden by Zapo, and the disappearances of tourists around the country. I was in prison by that time. But surprisingly, we were flooded with these questions from the police, asking us to tell them of the knowledge of these arms caches and the disappearances of these tourists. It doesn't make sense to ask somebody who has been already arrested and behind bars. You ask them about the life in the outside world.
So, I mean, you were in charge of security, and probably you knew, I mean, the happenings security-wise. Do you think Zapo ZPRA was actually responsible for the arms cache that we discovered?
No. The answer is clear, no. Zapo had nothing to do with the arms caches found. But the truth of the matter is that this country was coming out of war, and the freedom fighters who were operating the country were using arms, and a lot of arms caches were all over the country. Some dating back 50 years back, there were arms that were found. Many arms were found, yes, and the level was that Zapo had cached these arms, but it's not very true.
But how do we find arms in a Zapo property?
We were working with ANC, Umkhonto wesizwe. During our operations, we were moving in as freedom fighters, led by a reconnaissance team that would take arms and hide them for the ANC. As soon as they enter the country, making their way to the Limpopo in South Africa, they will make use of these weapons. So part of these weapons belonged to our brothers, the MK Umkhonto wesizwe, to assist them. Our idea initially was that as soon as Zimbabwe is free, Zimbabwe should also give assistance to MK. And those preparations were not going to start when Zimbabwe is free. We were operating and engaging war in Rhodesia with Rhodesians, driving Rhodesians out and trying to create liberated zones so that we're able to conceal whatever would help us tomorrow. And this is what had to be understood to help Umkhonto wesizwe to liberate themselves. We assisted these people up to 1994.
So now you find that the disappearance of, even the disappearance of the tourists, was that the work of Zapo?
No, that's a ZANU thing, that it's them who created that. Probably it's them who might have killed those tourists. Zapo cadre was a molded cadre, respecting cadre, very much disciplined. Zapo cadres had no business to do with just killing such people as tourists. For what? When the country had been won. We didn't see immediate enemies when looking to whites, because we had fought and defeated them, and now we had a country under black faces. And that black face was Robert Mugabe, not Joshua Nkomo at that time, but we accepted that this is what we had been fighting for under majority rule.
So you find that these incidents, all of them lead to Kukuraundi. And looking back and reflecting now, do you think Kukuraundi was justified?
Kukuraundi was a plan, a project, I think, planned before our attaining independence.
Why do you say so?
The visits that Mugabe had made with Korea earlier before independence, more after independence, I think those preparations were being done in that clandestine arrangements. And more, again, colluding with the Rhodesian whites. Because they were in charge of the DDR, the demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration. It was never done by us, the owners, ZANLA or ZPRA. It was done by the BIMA, the British Advisory Team, and the CIO.
So you think, one of the things, of course, linked to the whole brigade, 50th Brigade thing is the issue of dissidents, that they were coming to quell the dissidents.
The people when later named dissidents were those people who were demanding the release of Dumiso Tabengwa, Lookout Masuku, in fact the command, ZPRA command that had been arrested. They wanted those people released. and the need, the pressure that came as a need to be understood what they wanted done, became an issue that was turned to name them dissidents. Generally, yes, this would point to government to listen to them so that they release their commanders. It never happened. And these people, some of these colleagues decided to leave the army. They will be called dissidents. But their demand was genuine.
So was this group large to actually, warrant the deployment of the 5th Brigade?
It would be difficult to say that because I was in prison at that time. What was happening outside the prisons was for those who were in that kind of activity.
Yeah. So, but do you think, the deployment of 5th Brigade was justified based on the fact that now they were renegades who were turning against the government?
I think the deployment of the 5th Brigade must be understood from its creation. Its creation should have been done or was done to undertake a certain project. And that project mapped out earlier than at the time of attaining independence. So to discuss about the 5th Brigade as if it was a legitimate and an honest force set up would be very wrong. It was there for a purpose that had been planned in the early stages of our coming into attaining the independence in 1980.
Was this a genocide?
Yes. Thousands of people died, and no true number has yet been ascertained. And more of the record of the killings has not been accessed from various sources. We know from the geographical map of Zimbabwe that Rhodesia had set up churches in every 10 kilometers square in the country. There is a church. And the church strategic purpose is to collect information on every Sunday, early in the morning from the young children attending what we call Sunday school. In the afternoon, the elderly are coming in and these give reports. So the reports of all these happenings of the Kukuraundi period have not been accessed from these various churches in the country. And we are only told 20,000 people were killed. I don't know how we get to this number, where it is being sourced. It's not true. The number could be almost 3 or 4 times that.
With the work that you're doing, what do you think is the solution? How do you think, the government should handle the issue of victims of Kukuraundi, especially the surviving children and wives and husbands?
In my view, the issue of Kukuraundi, I think we need to set up a very strong, reliable, and trustworthy committee, which we can call it our own commission, that will receive and understand what the entire victims require done. That committee should have the capacity to put the people's terms of how the Kukuraundi issue should be handled.
But we have had the commissions before, the Chambako Commission. Now we have another commission. We know with the Chambako Commission, the report was never released.
No, but I'm talking about the victims' commission,
Yeah.
not the country's commission or the government's commission.
Yeah.
I mean the victims' commission.
So how do they then link with the government to find solutions to that?
The perpetrator is the government.
Yeah.
The victims must put their terms of how they should deal with the Kukuraundi issue. All those terms in favor of the victims.
Yeah.
This is how we look at it. This is how we can get closer to a solution.
Finally, do you think this Kukuraundi thing will ever be solved in our lifetime?
Yes, it's going to be solved. Probably let me give you an example of how the Americans went through when they were picked from, the black Americans, when they were picked as slaves in Africa. Some died when they were being chased to be leg ironed, and some died there. Some were thrown overboard ships. Some died in the sugarcane plantations in America. Some remained, and they thought of how then do they become a people that will be recognized through their dignity. I think it is the same scenario that we have gone through as in the space of a Kukuraundi event. We were killed. Some remained. As we sit here, we are the remains of the Kukuraundi. And we need to solve this problem once and for all. I think failure to solve any kind of a problem, in my view, I think it is an issue that relates very closely to the capacity, the educational capacity, not the school or academic education only. How we have mastered through our experiences and learning from other countries and other families how problems are solved. We are very mature, but I think that lack of the level that can take us out of this mess. We need to own this project, Kukuraundi, so that as owners we should dictate the terms of how it should be handled.
Yeah. So my final question, if there's someone who's doing research and they want to know more about Mafela Trust, what do they do?
Those that are doing research in the scholars or historians, Mafela Trust has vast knowledge on what has happened during the Liberation War, and we have archives that are accessible in our offices. We have entered some agreements with various institutions of world fame, where we exchange information. This information is no longer Zimbabwean heritage anymore, but for the world. So we really want to put up a clear policy which already exists, that the accession of our archives should be easier to the public.
I think with those informative words, I think we would like to thank you very much. Today I was talking to Zephaniah Nkomo, who is the director of Mafela Trust and former ZPRA intelligence officer under NSO. I think we have learned a lot from this talk, and he has clarified some of the issues and maybe many questions that we've always had. And I hope this will contribute to a long discussion that we've always had, that was Kukuraundi justified? Was Kukuraundi a pre-planned event way before independence, or it was because of the events that came before or after independence? But from his talk, we can clearly see that Kukuraundi was something that was planned, and it was a genocide that had taken a long time to planning, and all these other events that happened was just an excuse to deploy the 5th Brigade to do what they initially intended to do. My name is Zenzele Ndebele. Till we meet again tomorrow, have a good day.